Hello again, friends. And you are our friends, and it's pretty reasonable outside right now. And welcome back for another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru right here.
What the fuck was that?
Wherever it is that you have found it on this reasonably nice and pleasant day.
What the fuck was that? I just tell you just seconds ago how fatigued I am and how tired I've stayed up late at night burning the midnight oil trying to get the cult of Cornette there behind the curtains. And it's early in the morning, and I say, just do some of the heavy lifting here. I'll follow you. And what do you do? Third line in, if that. What did you say? I don't even know what that means.
Do the heavy lifting, and then you
reasonable
jump right
outside.
in. You jump right in.
Well, it's because you gave me no other choice. Because was it reasonable outside?
It's very reasonably pleasant and nice outside right now. It's about
the
70.
Fuck, who has ever said that? It's reasonable outside. When have you ever heard that? Have you ever heard that in a weather forecast? Has anybody ever walked up to you at the grocery and said it's very reasonable outside?
That's the old way they do things. I do things the new way. You got to get with what the kids are doing.
What kind of fucking outlaw mud show bullshit operation do these new listeners think that we got going on here when the first thing they hear is fucking unintelligible gibberish from a man that sounds like he's having a series of small strokes?
Or maybe one large stroke. But anyway, welcome to Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'm the great Brian Last, your host of this fine program, and the man over there throwing insults, just really awful today, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Just really, now you should have called me nasty.
Not pleasant. Not reasonable.
I'm not pleasant.
Not reasonable.
Not with it. Not with it. Green as a pepper tree. Frank Spaceman Hickey. Not with it. Boy's not with it. He's green as a pepper tree.
Were you ever around him?
I met him like once, but all the boys used to tell stories. Frank Morrell used to imitate him. And is it green as a pepper tree?
Remember they wheeled him out on Memphis TV in like 1993?
Yes.
Like in his full spaceman outfit. He was like old as hell. And oh my God, I forgot all about that until right now.
He was so voluminous. He had to weigh 350 at the time. And he was obviously, I think, in his 80s. And the reason he still had that outfit, the Frank Spaceman Hickey Spaceman outfit, complete with gold lame cape and skull cap and chest plate and the whole 9 yards, is because he had it on a mannequin in his room at the Wigwam Village down in Horse Cave, Kentucky. That's why the guys used to stop by and see him on the way up to Louisville from Nashville, where he lived. And I think he may have done some maintenance work there, but it's the Wigwam Village. I don't know if it's still there. This was 30 years ago or whatever, but it was a tourist little area, one of those roadside things from back in the 40s and 50s when people started traveling, and they were like wigwams for the teepees, for the Indians or the Native Americans, whatever. I'm sure I'm being just fucking racist as fuck right now with all this terminology, but this is what they called it, is a wigwam village, teepees that you could rent out. He had one. He lived there, had his Spaceman Hickey outfit on a mannequin and all his gimmicks on shelves on the walls and everything. He was also Bozo Brown.
Yeah.
For some time. But yes, they wheeled him out. He lived for the wrestling business, and all the boys loved him, so they had him come out and do that angle. I think Frank Morrell was involved because they were friends. And it was hilarious. But old Spaceman was probably the happiest guy in the whole deal.
Well, this has been a great blast off to this episode of.
Yeah, boy. We blasted off right down the Hershey Highway.
What?
We're going to the nether regions with this program. It's headed downhill. It's circling the porcelain throne. Let's pep it up a little bit. Our long national nightmare is about to be over with, ladies and gentlemen. If you have ordered not only Behind the Curtain, but anything from Cornette's Collectibles over the last, 2.5 weeks, domestically from the contiguous 48 United States and Hawaii and Alaska, then your packages, your books, your packages, your orders, your parcels, your gifts will be in the mail. What is this, Monday the 9th?
Yes.
Yes, with full-throated endorsement. I'm trying to. You're supposed to be keeping up with this shit. Anyway, it'll be in the mail this week. If you haven't already got it, and it's not already in the mail, it will be in the mail by midweek. That's how I've been burning the midnight oil. And our long international nightmare as we mentioned, there's quite a few international orders, and those require customs forms we got to fill out, and they got to be manually entered. So by the end of the week, the international orders will start going out, and we're going to have a relay system where I go and do an hour and a half or 2 hours of stuff and then come back and pack more boxes. And Stacy goes and ships off an hour, half, 2 hours worth of stuff. And within 7 days, if I make it, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I just hope it's not an oncoming train. But the theory is then a week from the end of this week, every one of the international packages will be out. We're going to be all caught up, back to quick service, getting a milkshake machine from Ray Kroc to make the service even quicker. And you know, even the people I begged over the last 2 weeks, please don't send me any more money. You know what the assholes are doing?
Making milkshakes?
They're sending me money. No, the milkshake deal flopped. We left it laying back on the side of the road a minute ago.
Did you see the Ray Kroc movie that came out a few years ago? Michael Keaton?
I did not. I haven't caught that Kroc yet. But anyway, I'm back to the information. So anyway, these assholes have kept sending me money over the past 2 weeks, and your stuff, I'm gonna get even with you. I'm gonna mail it out this week also. That'll teach you. So we're going to be caught up very soon, folks. Give me 10 days everywhere around the world. From Maine to Spain, globally, we'll be caught up.
All right.
And if not, if you really, and here's another thing. There's a few people been sending me emails. The longer I have to answer the emails, the less packy I do. The more email-y I do, the less packy I do. So please, I know I'm late. Don't ask. I've got your orders. It's just the fulfilling of the orders. So I'm trying to answer those emails too. But if you still, after the next couple weeks, don't get your package, and you feel like you need to get even, ladies and gentlemen, well then, I'm afraid I must do this, even though he's on our side. He does fight for the rights of the little guy. So if you need to sue me, you know who to call, ladies and gentlemen. The iconic interrogator, the Count of Cross-Examination, the Baron of the Barristers, the Lord of the Legal Eagles, the King of Torts, the Consigliere of the Cult of Cornette. Who do you call when you need to sue? Stephen P. New. NewLawOffice.com, 888-692-8084.
Is there anyone associated with this show that doesn't have 50 nicknames?
I'm trying to think. No, there is not. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, do you think they would turn my own consigliere against me, though, Brian? Do you think they would actually engage Stephen P. New to sue the leader of the cult?
I think people would stomp right over Jim Cornette to get their hands on their Jim Cornette merchandise. As silly as that sounds, yes, I think they will call Stephen P. New, and it will be all over Johnny.
They would thunder and stampede over the top of me in order to get to stuff that I have.
Yes.
So you're saying
make sure you sign it first. Just make sure you sign it first.
All the Cult of Cornette is doing is using me for my stuff, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah.
I thought they cared about me.
No, I'm kidding. They love you. They love you.
I want to be loved.
Until they get to court.
What's Cord Bauer got to do with this? Why would they love him more than me?
Absolutely.
Anyway, nothing. Stephen P. New is the man for you. If you need, you need to get that checked over there. He's gotten millions of dollars in judgments against big companies that fuck people over, and he is the champion of the little guy. So whether you have a problem with misdiagnosed illnesses, medical malpractice, pharmaceutical companies that have given you allegedly good medicine that has caused your genitals to have gangrene, whether it's you've got hearing damage from these faulty headphones they gave the military, whatever the case may be, you've got somebody on your side in a court of law. The NewLawOffice.com, 888-692-8084. Stephen P. New is the man for you, ladies and gentlemen. You can get even with Stephen.
That's right. And the lady who mows the lawn, her dog is barking now.
Wait a minute. The lady is now mowing her dog?
No, I misspoke, Phil. I don't know why.
What?
Oh, he's yelling. He's barking at the deer. I apologize if you could hear the barking dog from across the way. It's a good distance away, but it's a loud fucking dog.
Well, thank you, Davy Crockett. It's a good distance away. It's right down below the creek, across the meadow. You can hear the dog barking as it gets mowed. Kind of fucking people you got living in your neighborhood mowing dogs.
That's what I'd like to know. But hey,
some people have accused that woman of being Susie, trying to look in your window.
I don't know about no Susie. I know about Bree.
Oh, now you're admitting that there's something. Now you're because everybody's listening to the program over there at the post office. We're a big hit at the post office.
I don't know no Susie. I know Bree.
You're admitting that you're trying to move on from Susie, who had a thing for your voice, and instead you're going after Bree, who's a little bit younger than you, young man.
What I'm admitting is we have questions here that were sent in by the Cult of Cornette in various ways, various times, over and over and over again. They want to hear your answers. And in fact, one we're going to start with, Jim. Multiple people have sent it in this week. It's going to be the one we start with where I say, so many people have emailed this in. I'm going to ask one for everyone. I'm sorry if we didn't choose yours, but this is the hot button issue of the moment. So, Jim, everyone wants to know your take. This was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Pete Boyle. What are your thoughts on Ric Flair wanting royalties from WWE since they've given Becky Lynch the epithet, the man, and have been selling merchandise related to it?
Well, from what I understand, they didn't give it to her. She said it, and people picked up on it, which is something similar to Austin 316, right? But having said that, and I understand why that it's a great twist because the man is a woman, right? And the whole the man comes around thing, Johnny Cash, etc. There's a lot of shit you can do with it that Rick even couldn't do with it because there's not that element of it that it was a play on words to begin with. It's an update. But I can see where, with the amount of money involved, and he said it's not against Becky, and she was working with his daughter when it got started, but the WWE, they're making a ton of money. What if one of the girls decided to be Stone Cold something?
No, that's not in any way the same thing, though.
Well, but
if one of the girls called themselves Nature Boy, maybe there'd be an argument, although maybe the Buddy Rogers estate would pop up. But the man, I understand he said to be the man, you have to beat the man, but he didn't go out there and go, I am the man, call me the man, here's a merchandise with the man on it. It was nothing, it's two different things.
Okay, oh, goddamn, don't get hot. I'm tapping. On hindsight, yes, it is. But to be honest, Flair has been identified with the man to be the man and etc. for quite a period of time. I can see where he would think, "Hey, what the fuck?" And I can also see where they need to keep selling the shit and they need to keep using the man for Becky. And I think they ought to just send Rick a check. Fuck. It's not like they can't afford it.
I don't know. I mean, I don't want.
They just gave $300,000 to fucking Donald Trump's reelection. They can send the Nate a check if they've got that much money to fucking burn.
I'm not disagreeing with you in that way. Vince and Linda want to contribute there. Hey, help out someone like Ric Flair who did a lot for this industry. I mean, the fact that he still needs help is a problem. I was the biggest Ric Flair fan growing up, and I hate to see the way the last few years have gone for him. Like, when I saw the video of him talking about it on TMZ, it was just, it seems sad to me more than anything else. And that's, I guess, maybe one of the reasons why I look at this and I kind of dismiss like this. I mean, from his end of it, it's like, there's no case. He knows that this is ridiculous.
I don't say it's completely ridiculous because it's close there. I can see where someone would have feathers ruffled, but I don't think he deserves fucking half the money from now till the end of time. But if a guy like Flair is unhappy, the old time promoters would have figured out a way to slip him, a couple grand in a fucking brown paper bag or whatever. And Vince ought to do the same goddamn thing. Just keep peace to family.
Well, see, I agree with you from that end. It's just the actual basis for the lawsuit, I think, is ridiculous. But I agree with you. They should take care of Ric Flair.
And I'll tell you, here's another thing I can tell you from knowing Flair and also from a similar thing happening to me. He said that he called up And the guy and whoever he talked to in the office had no respect for him. I did the same thing one time when they did that World's Greatest Managers fucking DVD.
That. Yeah.
Right? Well, they tried to Zoom me because I was on the cover. Me and Heenan had the longest segments of anybody involved in the video. I also, the match with Paul Lee was on one of the extras, the WCW tuxedo match. And I never saw anything on my royalty checks, which at then, because of before the network, was still actually some decent amount of money. And so I waited a couple cycles and then I called up. I said, what the fuck? Well, I didn't even say what the fuck first. I said, I've gotten no royalties for this. And the guy said, oh, you're not entitled. What? Come to find out, they purposely, apparently, used only footage of me from WCW, which from the NWA and WCW, which had gone through the sale, and they didn't pay royalties on that footage, only on WWF footage. And then the extras, they don't pay royalties on the extras. And the cover, they're allowed to use my likeness from our previous arrangements, right? I said, wait a minute, you mean it? So he says, so you're not entitled to any. I said, let me tell you something, because this was when I was on the outs with them anyway, I think around 07-ish or whatever. I said, let me tell you something. I said, you better go back and take a look at that and figure out some way that I'm getting some kind of royalties for this goddamn DVD, because I would love to sue somebody named McMahon just for the fucking publicity. I think it was that, what was his name? Frank something or other in the office. Anyway, that handled the payoffs. Anyway, I said, I strongly suggest you to check into this further. And they did, and he called me back, and guess what they did? Because they fucked themselves up. In a transition shot, they used video of me walking to the ring with Yokozuna as B-roll. And it was only like a 7-second shot or whatever, but it wasn't WCW, it was WWF and blah, blah. So they had to go back and pay me fucking royalties for the goddamn thing. But they tried to get away with that, with me and Heenan being the two featured fucking managers, the lengthiest, and not pay me anything because they used all WCW and old NWA footage.
Again, I'm not disagreeing, but saying there's assholes in that office who don't treat wrestlers with respect. I'm not disagreeing with any of those points.
You're just disagreeing with the other points.
I mean, he knows every principal person involved there. His daughter's one of the biggest stars there. So he calls up someone in the office, they treat him with disrespect, and then he goes right to TMZ and talks. I mean, I don't know. Is that the timeline?
Well, I don't think he went to TMZ. I think they caught him coming out of an airport or something somewhere, and he decided to fucking give him news on what all's going on in his life. I can see that happening. I can see one of those goddamn, because you got to understand, once again, it's the same principle as when I came back from lunch at the office and one of the secretaries told me at Titan Tower that while I was gone, Harvey Race had called.
Yeah.
There are some people in that company that don't regularly deal with wrestlers, that don't know how to deal with wrestlers. And if especially an old timer like Ric Flair calls up expecting to be talked to a certain way, and it's sort of like Greg the Office Boy syndrome, where I had to talk Charlie Haas out of knocking him the fuck out. And Greg laughed about it until later on Charlie knocked somebody else out for real. And then he was like, well, I guess that could have happened to me. I can see where not talking to Vince or Hunter and talking to somebody in the business office or the legal end or whatever the fuck could immediately lead to, I'll sue you, you motherfucker, because they've got that way of coming off sometimes.
Do you think something like this scenario here, do you think that they look at this and they say, well, that's Rick doing it, and we're not going to penalize Charlotte at all? Should Rick have any consideration for how this would affect his daughter? What do you think about all of that? About the idea that he's not just doing this in a vacuum. His daughter is there in a top position, and I would think close with several people on top there. So, it creates a different dynamic than just doing this with no one close to you working there. What do you think of that end of it?
I don't think they're going to take any of it out on Charlotte. I think Hunter will probably at some point talk to Rick and they'll smooth things over a bit. I don't think this will be a lawsuit that will stretch on for years and years.
Well, Jim, let's stay on the topic of Hunter and Vince. Our next question was sent in via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi. In a recent interview, Triple H said Vince McMahon won't be involved with booking NXT when they move to USA. Do you think that Vince can stay away from NXT? And if Vince does take a hands-on approach with NXT, how do you think it will affect the product?
Well, I mean, at some point there comes a limit to just the time in the day and a human being's, responsibilities, especially if this XFL is starting. And I bet you Vince is going to be just over the moon about this thing because he wants to erase blemishes on his record while he still can. And he's 75. So between football and already having Raw and SmackDown and etc., I don't know if he'll have time to fuck with it. And probably, once again, to keep peace in the family, he probably would fuck with it less than he'd fuck with anything else, because if he starts changing shit, he's directly saying my son-in-law didn't do the right thing in the first place, which is why the son-in-law is not in the Heyman or Bischoff positions on Raw or SmackDown, because if it doesn't work out, they can always get fired, but you can't fire your son-in-law. So I think NXT is in a relatively good spot for being interfered with by Vince.
How do you think Vince will react if NXT ends up producing better ratings than Raw?
Well, I mean, the moon could be made of green cheese. I don't know that that's going to happen. Just because when you've got an established show with the established stars, and if nothing else, because it's the established show, and wrestling fans are creatures of habit. And that's why day changes, or in the old days, station changes used to hurt you. So, I mean, there's already 2 established programs, Raw and SmackDown. The third one, I don't think is suddenly going to, it might be a better television program, but I can't see the ratings surpassing what they're already doing.
But do you think they get a bump just from the association with, TNT is going to pour all this money, and they already are pouring a ton of money into promoting. We know firsthand they're promoting a ton of money into promoting AEW right now. How does that help NXT? Obviously running directly opposite it. It's direct opposition to AEW. It's being positioned right against it. In terms of ratings, the idea that it will be, it's not as hot as Raw and Nitro right now, where it was a Monday Night War and people going back and forth and the ratings for both shows went up. But how do you think it affects in a positive way NXT going against AEW?
I mean, the NXT is the best program for the WWE to counter program AEW with, because it's more about the younger indie style and the work rate, as the kids say these days, and another one of those made up words that we never had in the business. So that's the best product, because it's going to take away people who are teeter-tottering or on the fence. I mean, the people who love the Young Bucks and Kenny Olivier and, silly modern wrestling are already going to watch this show. They're probably going to DVR NXT and then watch it later on like porn where nobody knows. But the ones that are on the fence and just want to either try out a new wrestling program or see some good athleticism and don't have any preconceived notions are probably going to like NXT better, because it's going to have the affiliation and they're going to have names and blah, blah, blah. So, but even if you're shooting to get 1 million people and you take away 200,000, you've taken away a lot of fucking people. You've taken away 20% of your audience. So we'll see what happens. But at the same time, it's 20 years later, and a lot of people don't have to, once again, switch back and forth. They can just DVR the fucking thing. We'll see what happens.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Mike in Long Island, New York. I sent this once, but much like Fredo, I was passed over. But I know this is a good question, and since first sending, I've made my first purchase from Cornette's Collectibles, so I'm hoping this sways you into giving me a shot. Quick question.
So you're one of those assholes that sent me money when I asked you not to.
It says in parentheses, hardcover comic, so I believe he is. Yes.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Well, I did. I brought that on myself. I asked him to send me money for that.
Here's his question. What was the first finish you remember seeing where you thought it was too much and crossed that fine line between looking great but still being safe enough to pull off on a nightly basis? I remember watching Chris Candido pulling off a top rope powerbomb on a fairly regular basis in 1995 and 1996 that gave me pause. I guess some people could make the argument that even as far back as the Road Warriors using the Doomsday device was the first instance, but for as many times as they did it, there weren't a ton of injuries, excluding Henry Godwin, I guess. And that's the end of it's a weirdly put question, but I guess, when did you first start seeing finishers that you thought, wow, that's close to being really dangerous?
Well, goddamn Candido started doing that powerbomb in Smoky Mountain, him and Bobby Blaze. And when he first told me, I was like, what? Once again, him and Bobby, the idea was to put them with the junior heavyweight belt that we had at the time, to put them on the card to do the athletic match that other guys weren't doing, especially in the main event where it was more angle, grudge, etc. And they were young guys that could do a bunch of shit. And I was nervous about it and didn't necessarily like it, but I was all right, if he's the only one that does it, and Bobby was the only one that was going to take it, it was helping them get over on the undercard. And they both did it well, and neither one got hurt. We never did it anymore. But I guess he did it a lot in ECW and etc. I don't know. I don't remember the first time, because you never, if you don't know that something is going to be significant at a later date, you don't necessarily, write it down. Like I never wrote down the day and time that I watched my first TV wrestling show. When the first time I ever saw wrestling on TV, I didn't immediately go write it down. Oh, this is the first time I've ever seen my future career. So the same thing is when it happens gradually, and especially in other places, because remember, for most of the 90s, I was either in Smoky Mountain, where we obviously weren't doing crazy bullshit like they were doing in ECW or the early independents. And then I was in the WWF, where they were doing crazy bullshit, but it wasn't stupid crazy bullshit, and it was with a budget and planned out and somewhat professionally pre-planned, sketched out. We ain't gonna fucking just try this shit on the fly and kill ourselves, except for Mick Foley every once in a while. But at some point during the 96 through 99 period that I was in the WWF, I saw guys starting to go too far, and then you'd see more of it on WCW. But then I went to OVW, where once again, nobody was going to be allowed to go too far. And we had a spectacular business for a number of years doing wrestling, but I would see, whenever I watched still the WWF tapes, or even the new modern independents, where it's like, what the fuck are you people doing? So I can't remember the first time, because it happened gradually, but it's been at least 20 years that guys started just openly doing stupid shit that they don't know how to do, or that they shouldn't be doing, even if they do. The guys at the high level that perform the tables, ladders, and chairs and all that stuff. Even then, Joey Matthews got his face caved in by one of those ladders and almost killed him, and other guys have been hurt. So it's been the last 20 years. A lot of guys grew up as we've talked about, fans of either Mick Foley taking bumps and didn't realize that there was a lot more to him, or just ECW in general, and they didn't get the fact that that was a fucking, I'm sorry, but everybody says they watch ECW these days and it doesn't hold up as well as Smoky Mountain does, or even Memphis of the 90s, or wrestling of the 90s, because it was so pop culture fad oriented, flavored, and so much of it was garbage wrestling to disguise, and Paul did a great job of it, but to disguise the fact that he couldn't afford the major league talent. So that's why he had the reputation for getting the most out of guys that he could get. And a lot of that was through the garbage wrestling matches, the hardcore shit. And, but then, those guys ended up, many of them either on pain pills, or they're currently dead, or in not good shape physically, because they were allowed by the boss, which is the biggest issue I've always had with Paul's company, to do too fucking much. and over and over, repetitively.
I'll tell you what, let me jump in real quick, Jim, because this one question has turned into a completely different answer. So let me ask another question that came in, and then we'll get back to this. But this question came in via email from Jeff. I heard you rant about the GoFundMe for the Deathmatch Idiot. I completely agree. Do you think Paul Heyman deserves some blame for warping a generation of people into believing that hardcore death matches are actual wrestling?
Yes. Yes, because they, in the literal definition and application of the word, these goofballs were marks for ECW, but it's just like the goofball Vince Russo was a mark for wrestling angles and wrestling promos without understanding what all he remembered was Jimmy Snuka got hit with a coconut. He didn't remember the build-up or the follow-through or whatever. He just high spot mentally, image, angle, promo, high spot. That's what he thought wrestling was. These guys and those who have followed them didn't understand that it was a component of ECW, that they also had the Malenkos and the Guerreros, and they also had guys that could fucking work, actually, and they also had fucking personalities and booking that covered up for the lack of personalities in some cases. And all they saw was the fucking, barbed wire car crash shit. And because they were marks and they were one-dimensional, not multi-dimensional, and that appealed to them for some reason. Hey, let's mutilate myself and let me try to get people to watch me do it. And so, yes, he deserves quite a bit of the blame. And I wish I had the email in front of me because I was going to print it out and I lost it. But somebody emailed me why. I'm trying to remember the way it was phrased, but basically because I blistered the fluorescent light tubes and the fucking barbed wire and the broken glass and the panes of glass and all the stupid shit that they use in these matches. And he said, I've been watching wrestling and I've seen old tapes and they had tables and chairs in the ring and whatever back in the 70s. And yes, that's true. They did. And here is the difference. And here's something else that, once again, the young kids these days don't think about, have never been informed of or instructed or educated about, because they don't give a shit, because they just want silliness. You always used, and go back in anything that I've ever had anything to do with, in Ring of Honor, except if in some cases like the goddamn ladder match where I said, okay, the fans all want the ladder match, let them do whatever they want to do. But in OVW and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, et cetera, what should be used in a wrestling match as far as foreign objects and what shouldn't be? Well, let's start with what should be under the ring. This was part of the art of doing shit like this when you were trying to make people believe what they were seeing, is that you couldn't just pull out a fucking VW Beetle out from under the fucking ring and use it without people going, well, why the fuck is that there? Right? So now they pull all this shit out. Why the fuck is that there? What's under a ring? A toolbox. So you got hammers, you got screws, you got fucking wrenches. You got, whatever the fuck is in a toolbox. What's around ringside also? An announcer's table. One. Maybe you have another table under the ring in case that table gets broken, but one tops. When there's 5 tables under the ring or all these fucking sheets of wood, and they pull them out, it's just because, well, obviously that was put there for this fake fucking exhibition of wrestling to use. There were chairs that the announcer sat at his announce table. There's a ring bell. That's been used in the past. There's sometimes a hammer or an instrument that rings that fucking bell. What else would be under the ring? I'll tell you, one of my favorites is, I think the first time I saw it was Jackie Fargo doing a TV studio, because there was one hanging on the wall, but I used it in Smoky Mountain. One time we had Ricky Morton in a Smoky Mountain street fight, tied by his neck to the fucking ropes, and he was bleeding and he was hanging there and he was helpless, and the Heavenly Bodies were double teaming Robert Gibson. And the ring crew guy comes out with a knife and cuts Ricky down, and he drops, and then he gets up and he looks and he sees his partner who's in the ring, being pummeled by these 2 guys, and I'm fucking keeping the referee away. And he goes under the ring and he comes out with a fire extinguisher. And I understand now some of them are poisonous. You can't do this. But back then, And he gets up on the apron where everybody can see him, and the heels look around, and he fucking shoots one of the heels to face with a fire extinguisher from like 8 feet away. But it makes a big fucking pop from the people, a big fucking cloud. And he shoots the other heel. Oh my God, now the heel's blind and he can't see. And that's the way he starts the fucking comeback. Then he picks up a chair and goes from there, because that would be under the ring. There's no reason otherwise than we're setting up a phony stunt show for fluorescent light tubes to be under the ring, for rolls of barbed wire to be under the ring. They used to have barbed wire matches, but not where the guys would get rolled up in it, but where it would be surrounding the ring post, and part of the drama of the match was trying to force your opponent into the real barbed wire. But you didn't actually get rolled up in it, because that would be fucking stupid. And nobody broke panes of glass, because did I mention that's fucking stupid? You can cut an artery that way. It was about what was in your environment, in the atmosphere, naturally, that somebody could, on the spur of the moment, without pre-planning, see, grab a hold of, use in some kind of way, and make it a part of the match, rather than just shit put out there for people to play around in a phony exhibition. And that's the difference. So what objects are okay? If it reasonably belongs under a wrestling ring or around a wrestling ring, then figure out creative ways to fucking use it. If it doesn't, don't. And I liked ladder matches when they invented them in Calgary, when Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon had one. Okay, you grab this ladder and you climb and get the belt. It's a updated fucking coal miner's glove match, which also, when done well by people who know what they're doing, are very fucking exciting. But now that they added tables, ladders, and chairs, why the fuck are the ladders and the tables and the chairs involved? Or a tables match where you have to put your opponent through a table to win. That's the stupidest fucking thing that I've ever heard of in my life. That's why I've never booked one. Because in what other athletic contest would you win a boxing match by knocking your fucking opponent through the goddamn ringside table? It's stupid, and it makes it contrived and showy. Take a bump through the fucking table in a regular match, but don't do it very often, just like the fire extinguisher you do once every couple of years. And on the big show, somebody goes through the fucking table. But don't just do multiples of it on every show, because then it becomes what it is now, goofy shit, stupid human tricks that guys do to pop a crowd there, whatever their definition of a meager crowd is, and risk their necks, and people, by the next match, they've forgotten about it because they see it over and over. If you're just coming up with, why is there a cookie sheet under the ring? There could be a garbage can, but why is there a cookie sheet in a garbage can? Why would there be a road sign under a wrestling ring in an arena? Well, the answer is because it sounds good when you hit a guy with it, but it's stupid. You've killed the buzz. You've shit the bed. Already, when you bring out something like that, it's obvious. Then don't even get me started on the fucking thumbtacks. You couldn't even win a real fight with thumbtacks, but you really can fucking hurt yourself with thumbtacks. So that's the stupidest thing that's ever happened in wrestling, because it was a goddamn fad that then a couple of guys that fucking people liked started doing, and now everybody does it. But it's fucking ignorant. And it makes wrestling look like the lowest of the low fucking... They don't even do the freak shows at State Fair anymore. I can't go and see the goddamn world's fattest man with tits as big as my Aunt Lola's head. And I can't go and see the fucking five-legged fucking sheep, or the cow with one eye, or the bearded lady. But I can go to what's supposedly a professional wrestling fucking match, even in a major NBA-style arena, and I can watch guys rolling around in fucking thumbtacks, which is stupid.
What do you think when you hear, and I'm sure you have because I have, people say that you can't say anything negative about the ECW kind of brawls because it came out of Memphis. It's all Memphis-based. Memphis did it, so you can't really criticize anyone else for doing it.
Well, yes, you can, because Memphis didn't do it like that. It just, once again, did I mention the word marks? The guys in the business were the marks more than the fans. Once again, In Memphis, they had a barbed wire match where they wrapped barbed wire around the ring posts, and the drama of the match was trying to force your opponent into it, and they had a match in the middle of it. In ECW, they have a barbed wire match where the guys actively roll around and get rolled up in barbed wire for real and cut themselves up for real. In Memphis, they hit each other over the head with fucking gimmicks that were gimmicked. I'm not going to spoil all the secrets here, but if you've watched Ring of Honor or even a little MLW over the last few years, you've seen some gimmicked gimmicks, and you can't tell them from the real ones that people are bashing each other over the head with and getting fucking concussions because they're gimmicked. Because there's a little art to that. And Memphis never had just blatantly stupid matches, hardcore matches, where guys, instead of hitting each other with garbage cans and chairs or running each other into tables that happen to be there at ringside, built like they went to Home Depot and got a do-it-yourself kit, and they're in shop class at high school, built these structures to then cooperate in taking bumps through, fooling absolutely nobody in the audience that they're really fucking fighting with each other. It's just a stunt show. They didn't do any of that because I watched it every fucking night. That's because there are some people who are marks who only see one dimension of the thing and don't understand the depth of it or the presentation of it or the logic of it. Even though there were silly things done in Memphis wrestling, just like there were silly things done in a lot of territories in wrestling, if it was good, if it drew money, it was because it still made sense within the presentation. Nobody was winking at each other saying we're really playing at being mad, but we're not. It wasn't phony and silly for the sake of being phony and silly. If something was silly, it was to make fun of the heel, who then came back and did something dastardly to get even. And then the babyface sold it like he's goddamn blown up with a hand grenade, and it was real. And then the babyface wants to get revenge, which is real. Even if that revenge is making a fucking buffoon out of the heel instead of hurting him physically. Because that, as the story was told so many times, hurts a man worse to be humiliated than it does to be punched in the face. So that way you could endlessly, especially in a weekly territory like Memphis or anywhere in the South, instead of bloodying and beating and fucking hurting your heel every week, it was more important sometimes that you embarrassed him and humiliated him. And that was the blow off. And you could get more mileage out of that because you weren't destroying a guy's body. There's layers and there's elements of this that they don't understand because all they did was grow up watching people hit each other over the head with shit on television. And then they were allowed to get in the business because now any fucking jackleg can get in the wrestling business. So they don't know these things. You ought to see some of the guys that have been around for a while. When we'll need something at a TV and I will give them my shopping list and tell them, bring this back to me and I'll fix you something. You ought to see them with their fucking mouths open like, we didn't know you could do that. What the fuck have you been doing? We just hit people with this shit. What the fuck?
Well, our next question, Jim, sent in via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Byron Frazier. As an avid consumer of your podcast and YouTube clips...
Wait a minute. He's consuming us?
Apparently, allegedly.
What is this man's name? Brian Frazier?
Byron Frazier.
Flying Byron Frazier. He's consumed with us. All right, go ahead.
I've heard plenty of your thoughts about Vince McMahon and the damage he has done to the industry, as well as the stories poking fun at his idiosyncrasies and peculiarities. But I've always wondered if you have any positive opinions that you've never shared. Was there anything you liked about Vince the Booker, Vince the businessman, or even Vince the human being?
Well, no, I've shared many good things about Vince or things that I give him credit for. Vince is not a great booker. Vince has always used bookers or a creative team, but Vince is a great promoter. Obviously, he's made this much money and gone this far. Part of it, you have to be a fucking, one of those crackpots that wants to work yourself to death, but still, nevertheless. Vince and also he's not a booker, but he understands, or at least he used to. When I was around him and for years before that, he had a reputation for being able to pick talent and know which talent to push and then have his booker push his vision. And he did a very good job at that. Vince, it can be fun to hang out with if you're just around the house and there's no goddamn, screaming, crying clique or talent problems or whatever, and you're just shooting the shit. He can be entertaining. He has done a number of things for me that he didn't have to, especially when I was up there the first time. And I was trying to rent a house, and this woman was a fucking crackpot that I was trying to get it from. Was the only one we could find out with, or the only one we could find with air conditioning. He said, just pay her a year in advance. I said, well, I just came from Knoxville. I don't have a year in advance. He said, I'll advance it to you, pal. So he advanced me the rent for a year in advance to pay this woman to get her off my back and get the house I wanted. He did take it out of my check, but that was nice of him. If it wasn't for, if only he could have used that power for good, I guess, right? If it wasn't for what he has always wanted to turn the wrestling business into and the thing that he wants to be Disney and put smiles on people's faces, if he'd have had the Bill Watts opinion of wrestling, but with the Vince McMahon business acumen and fucking drive, why, we'd all be right as rain. Pro wrestling would be the UFC right now.
Outside of wrestling, is he sociable? Like, have you seen him interact with people that weren't wrestling people? And how does he do in that situation?
Well, he doesn't, if people on the street that he don't know recognizes him, he doesn't spit in their face, but he spends as little time with them as possible because generally we're going somewhere. He's about to do something, right? He's not a gregarious, like Pat Patterson will go into a fucking hotel bar and speak to everybody there and be singing karaoke, right? Vince would, if he was in the bar, would be with his table with a group and speaking to them and not just fucking taking over the whole building. So he's not just an openly social, gregarious person in that respect, but he, when you're just hanging out and it's the group, he can have fun. His face doesn't smile. His face doesn't crack if he smiles. He has the big laugh, oh, pal. But he's just got those, what do they call them? The picadillos.
Yeah. Well, our next question, Jim, emailed in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Ben in Washington. In the Guy Evans book Nitro that I'm currently reading, there's an aside about Bill Watts and his propensity to urinate out his office window. A, do you know of this? And if so, B, have you ever seen it?
Well, I wasn't up to his office in Atlanta at Turner, but I think twice, and he didn't do it while I was there. But oh yes, well, he's on the fucking, can't remember what floor it was, but many floors up. He's got the fucking balcony right there. Well, everybody pisses off their deck, right? That's the first thing you do when you move in a house with a deck. You christen the deck. You piss off the deck.
What?
Doesn't everybody do that?
I've never heard of that before. No.
It must be a Southern thing. I piss off my deck.
You're making this up. You see, you're making this
up.
up.
No, I'm not. You christen the deck. When you move in a house with it, you piss off the deck. It's just his deck was like 20 stories up. But yeah, especially if I'm on the phone, and I don't want to hear him. I don't want to hear, the stream in the toilet. I'll just piss off the fucking deck. I'm still talking. Nobody's none the wiser. But besides, everybody pisses off their fucking deck.
For the record, I've never pissed off my deck.
Well,
never even thought about it.
I'm sorry that you had to grow up in such a restrictive environment up there in the Northeast, where a man can't even be free to piss off his own deck. Boy, here's Travis Bickle's artwork for this week.
No, it's not. YouTube may have a problem with that one.
With the golden shower episode of the Corny's Drive-Thru. But anyway, but here's what Watts did do also. He was so fucking miserable. and I can identify with this because they gave me, and it was the same place Jerry Jarrett was too. When you would come up there to work and you were having to relocate, they would get you an apartment in this high-rise building in Stamford down from Titan Tower, just, it wasn't a mile or whatever. And they'd get you an apartment until you could find a place you wanted to live permanently, right? And they were nice apartments. You had a big old living room, and it branched into a dining room, had a small kitchen, but there was a bedroom and a bathroom and a nice little closet area, and it was a brand new building. But the problem was, it's fucking downtown. They don't have a parking lot. They got a parking garage. You got to have a fucking key card to get in the parking garage, right? Then when you park your car, you've got to have another key. No, you get in the elevator and you go down to the lobby, and then you come through the lobby where the doorman is, and you got to have another key to get in the elevator to go up to your fucking floor. And they look at you weird. That always made me uncomfortable. I'm not used to living around people. And then you go up to the fucking 12th floor or whatever, and then you need 2 keys to get in your goddamn door. Plus there's a key to the mailbox. So everybody that would move up there from the south would always be miserable because it's like the goddamn opening theme of Get Smart to get in your fucking house, right? Dun, 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 doors closing. So Watts, when he left, Jerry Jarrett has mentioned he was up to drinking 2 bottles of wine a night, and Jerry Jarrett's never been a big drinker, but he was like, I got to get the fuck out of here, get back to Nashville. I was the same way, only mine was fucking 2 dinners and 3 dinners a night. That's why I weigh 280 pounds. Watts didn't drink heavily or gain a lot of weight, but he was so miserable that when he left, he took a shit and he left it in that apartment that he was in somewhere that it was going to take them a while to find. just to let him know what he thought of. But yes, and he also used to piss off the deck at Turner. But he was in the South Tower. They did because the wind was right. If it had been in the North Tower, it might have hit somebody in the face.
Are there a lot of people in wrestling just obsessed with the various defecations and urinations they can make in various places and bizarre places? I mean, Johnny Valentine had that reputation for going into a hotel and finding ways to unscrew things so he could shit in them and then screw them back together.
Yeah.
Is this a common theme throughout wrestling history?
Well, and then also, I'll have you know that Bobby Eaton, the world prostate champion, Bobby Eaton, when he was in young and in fighting shape, I don't know, I haven't seen him do it lately, but he could stand on the side of the road and he could piss completely over a full-size rental car, all over the top, not just the trunk or the hood, but over the top and to the other side without getting a drop on the roof.
Wow.
I've never seen anything like it.
All right.
Fire hose Eaton.
Our next question, Jim.
Well, you had to spend. As a matter of fact, here's another shit story. I took pictures of Ken Wayne in his Stray Cat gimmick, right? When we were in Georgia that summer of '83. He was the Stray Cat, which was a Tiger Mask ripoff. But he could do some of the fucking cartwheels and stuff, right? So I took, because he was going to sell these at the gimmick table. So I took a bunch. And then it just so happened that night, I took a particularly sizable and painful Russo. I don't know what I'd eaten, but my God, it was coming out hot. It was huge. I could hear flesh ripping. And when I looked at what I had wrought afterwards, it started at the top of the water line at the back of the bowl and continued all the way in a shape, all the way to the front of the bowl and reached to the top of the water line. Now, it wasn't just floating across the top. It was stretched out across the bottom because it was heavier than water. So it was even longer, stretched to the top of the water line in front. It was really impressive, almost as good as Randy Marsh's. So I took a picture of that on the same roll of film that I'd just taken Ken's pictures. And then when I got them developed, I went and showed them to him, his gimmick pictures to see if he liked them and how many he wanted to get to sell. And I said, look, here's one I took of you without your mask on. And I handed him, and he popped. You had to be there.
All right, well.
You just had to be there.
Let's move away from this topic as fast as we can.
You remember Barry Windham dropped his rental car keys in a toilet bowl one time at a WCW TV taping.
Yep, I know this story.
And he's like, fuck. And Rip Rogers hears him, says, what's the matter? I dropped my keys in my rental car. I can't get out of here. They're in the toilet bowl. Rip said, how much they worth to you? What? For $50, Rip Rogers reached in the toilet bowl and got the keys out.
Was it a full toilet bowl of?
I wasn't there, so legend.
Is that the story?
Well, yeah, legend has embellished what was in the toilet. I don't imagine it was that sanitary because Barry had been using it, but, you know, I don't think it's like a fucking porta potty at a fish concert out in a field type of fucking state.
All right. Well, our next question. Thankfully,
maybe Travis can do a porta potty out in a field at a fish concert. With,
I don't know.
with Rip Rogers peeking out the door.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Paul. Jim, the Big Boss Man, and Bobby Eaton both threw incredibly quick right hands from their hips. I've only seen a few wrestlers do it like this. It leads me to believe that Bobby may have actually taught the move to Bubba, or that Bubba just picked it up from watching Bobby. Which is correct?
Well, a little bit of both. Obviously, Bubba was watching. You know, that's one of the reasons why he had such great on-the-job training, because he got to watch Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey, then Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, and the Rock and Roll, and the Road Warriors, and Dusty and Magnum, and all of the top baby faces we worked with up close, and get to work with them in his rookie year. And Bobby's punch is just phenomenal. But when a guy, you didn't expect it out of a guy the size of Bubba, because he threw it so quick. He could move so quick. That's another of the things that Dusty saw about him. Not only taking the slingshot suplex, from Tully at 360, but also just the way he moved so quick, and he was so agile. He was bendable and flexible for a big guy like that. He wasn't a big bodybuilder physique type. He was just a big, powerful guy, but one of his things was he did the Billy Jack kick, where he told me one day, he said, "Jimmy, what about if I stand in front of the guy, and as he's standing in front of me, I take my right foot and I kick him on the right side of his face?" I said, "Can you do that?" He said, "Yeah." And he did this fucking wheel kick up and as high as his head was. I said, "Fuck." So just all that shit he could do, but he saw Bobby's punch and said, "Oh, I can do this." And he never quite got the he did a more uppercut. He started doing a more uppercut shoulder slap, whereas Bobby would bring it around from the side, and Bobby's slap was so quick that really you couldn't pick up on it. It was only when people started doing it because they liked Bobby's that you started picking up on the slap. Bobby's one of the first slappers I saw. And I think it just kind of spread from him. But yeah, that was the thing is if Bubba needed, if he had any questions, the boys would readily answer it, but also he could just kind of, steal things, which was encouraged.
Did Bobby ever say who he stole it from?
I don't know if he stole it from anybody. I'm trying to think now, to be honest. It's been around so long and I've seen him do it so long. I'm trying to think if I saw anybody do it before him. I'm sure somebody did, but not in that same way. Nobody ever really threw it as quick and as accurate. And then Bobby had a couple punches. The straight one to the fucking face, I always hated, because you didn't know when to sell it, because he never touched you. But it looked like that he'd punched you right in the face. And then the fucking slap and the fucking right to the side of the head, he would uncork that so fast you wouldn't really have time to see it coming, and you wouldn't be able to see through it. But you heard the sound, and especially if somebody like Ricky Morton or Brad Armstrong sold it, it was fucking fabulous. But I'm trying to think if I don't remember seeing a lot of people doing that, especially not that way.
Hey, Jim, we didn't get a question about this, but you talking about being in Georgia in '83 reminded me. Any thoughts about the news of the recent passing of Norman Frederick Charles III, the Royal Kangaroo?
Oh, yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, I had jotted that down, and I was going to bring it up on the experience, but we'll do it here. I managed him for a very brief period in the summer of '83. But if people, they've been forgotten now, but before Luke Williams and Jonathan Boyd, and later Luke Williams and Butch Miller were the sheep herders, Jonathan Boyd and Norman Frederick Charles III were the Royal Kangaroos. And in the early 70s, they main evented a bunch of territories. They were big deals in the Carolinas when it was still a tag team territory. They worked in California. They worked out in the Midwest, and et cetera. The point is, It was a takeoff on the original Fabulous Kangaroos, Al Costello and Roy Heffernan and later Don Kent, because the Kangaroos under Al Costello, the dynasty was that they were the best tag team because the Australians invented tag team wrestling. That's why, especially in Florida and some places, back in the old days, they would bill it as an Australian tag team match. So along comes Al Costello and the Kangaroos, and they're supposedly the tag team experts. And the Kangaroos drew huge money for 15 years. So the Royal Kangaroos, because of Boyd and Norman were from Australia also, they decided to make that work. And they used the boomerangs as gimmicks. And they were a big bumping team, and they drew quite a bit of money, but then they'd gone their separate ways, and Boyd became one of the sheep herders. And anyway, where I was going with this is that was the early 70s. And Norman Frederick Charles had been working in Australia for 10 years before that as Murph the Surf and the Magnificent Maurice and a few other names. But anyway, when Dundee was chosen to be booker of the Georgia territory that summer, we've talked about so many times, brought some guys down from Tennessee, including myself and Bobby Fulton, Terry Taylor, and those guys. Norman had been looking for a place to work because this was actually, I believe, the last place that he worked before he retired was the Georgia that summer. He'd been in Southeastern and Continental for the previous couple of years. He was looking for a spot, and Dundee knew him from Australia. So he booked him, and the first day of TV, we all knew each other from Tennessee, but, none of us had really ever met Norman because he hadn't really been around the business previous few years. So he comes in, and immediately he's fucking hilarious. And I'll never forget Dundee's opening line when Dundee saw him for the first time in what has it been, 10 years. He said, "God damn, Norman, we're the same age. What the fuck happened to you?" Because Dundee was 42 and looked 30, and Norman was 42 and looked 55. It was just that craggy face he had. And also his tights, he was still wearing the same Royal Kangaroo tights from the early 70s. The multicolored sewn together ones and everything. But you could tell there was threadbare. You could tell Norman was ready to hang the tights up, right? He was not putting any money in new outfits. His old shit, his boots were scuffed and everything, but he was fucking hilarious. He was old-time heel in the ring. He would do a thing where he'd grab the fucking baby face in the headlock, and before he gouged his eye, he would hold his fucking thumb up so that everybody in the building could see it and stick it in his mouth and wet the end of his thumb and then stick it in the fucking baby face's eye. And just to get a little extra heat, right? Yeah, you motherfucker. And he had been a big bumper in his day, but his body at that point, because of that, was not willing, but he knew all the old-timer tricks. And, when we went out to eat, he'd ask the waitress, he'd say, "Are you allowed to take tips?" She'll say, "Oh, yes, sir." "Well, then take a tip over there and get me another water, would you?" Fuck. And every night he got the cheapest beer apparently sold in America was Schaefer beer. And he would get a 6-pack of that every fucking night for like $1.99. And he was a great guy. And we, basically for the 6 weeks we worked together, and then they closed it down and he went back to Pensacola. I never saw him again. He never wrestled again, I don't think, but he was still living down in Milton, which is the Florida Panhandle, when he passed away last week. So, but it was a fun guy to be around. And, once again, just being around some of those old timers, it allowed me to pick up shit. I remember fucking sticking my goddamn thumb in my fucking mouth before I fucking thumbed a baby face in the eye with it, just picking it up from watching Norman do it. But that, anyway, he was a great guy. I didn't know him that well, but I enjoyed that. That was a fucking motley crew I had, though. Norman Frederick Charles III in his kangaroo outfit with a boomerang and a bush hat. King Carl Fergie and Lawler's hand-me-down cape and a fucking crown. The Angel, Frank Morrell, with the Iron Claw, who was the only one of us that had really ever drawn, well, I shouldn't say serious money. Frank had worked for Watts. He'd been in one of the first main events at the Superdome. He'd been around for quite a while. He was probably a senior member. And then Jerry Novak of the Bounty Hunters, who I loved him to death. What a great guy. He was Czechoslovakian or whatever, spoke with an accent. But when they started, him and David Novak, as the Bounty Hunters in the early 70s, they were like 215, 220 pounds apiece. And they had the cowboy hats on and the fucking jean jackets, and Jimmy Kent was their manager usually. And they're from Tombstone, Arizona, right? Well, I had seen them many times when I was a kid, but I'd never got a chance to work with any of them. So I meet Jerry now in 1983. He had come to Memphis, and then he came to Georgia first and then went to Memphis. Anyway, he had to be 325 pounds and no fat. He was just enormous. He was like 6'3", but at that time he'd bulked up to like 325, and he was fucking huge and strong as a bull, and he wasn't fat. He looked fucking impressive, right? He had slowed down as you would imagine that he would with gaining that much weight, but goddamn it, he taught me a few tricks about dealing with the fans. And he's like, if one ever gets up in your face, don't fucking be fucking flat squared off with him. Always turn to one side or the other so you can protect your balls if he tries to go to kick you in the balls, shit like that, right? But you didn't have to worry if Jerry Novak was around because his hand was like a catcher's mitt. And he would fucking, crush somebody if he got him. So I always enjoyed having him with the rowdy crowds. I never saw him after we left either. That territory just fucking ended a lot of my relationships.
With Norman Frederick Charles, it's interesting just how many guys went to work for Ron Fuller and fell in love with Pensacola and moved there.
Yeah.
Right? Well, Adrian Street, Austin Idol. I didn't even know about Norman Frederick Charles until you just said that.
Oh, yeah, with the Armstrongs. The whole Armstrong family. But here was the thing. When you worked that territory, you could literally, if you lived in Pensacola and you got in the apartment complex and like the boys and everything near the beach, you could sit out on the beach in Pensacola until 5 o'clock every day, then get in a car and drive less than an hour and a half, except for like a Birmingham, which was one of the major towns, to the show. You'd be back in your own home to watch the 11 o'clock news or at least the fucking Tonight Show and do the same thing all over again the next day. All the guys had tan time, gym time. And, that's why Piper quit Atlanta that time and went to Pensacola so that because he was making $2,000 a week, but he was spending that on coke, and Ole was getting mad at him. So he went to Pensacola so he could have a short trip territory and do his fucking coke.
Piper didn't go to Pensacola.
He did at one point, didn't he? When he quit Atlanta? Did he not?
I don't remember. I mean, Michael Hayes, I know, ended up there. I got to go back and check. I don't remember Piper ending up there.
I thought he went at one. Well, anyway, nevertheless, Pensacola and Knoxville, to an extent before that, which Knoxville had the lakes and all the guys had boats and everything, was a short trip territory. A lot of times guys would go and work them for less money than they'd make somewhere else because they only ran maybe 5 or 6 nights a week instead of 7. And you didn't have 6 and 8 hour drives or more. You had, an hour and a half, and you could, fucking fuck around all day. And I know that poor old fucking quick draw Rick Mcgraw, he literally used to, when he worked that territory, he would live on the beach. He would fucking go to wrestle and get back to Pensacola about midnight or earlier and fucking go out to a club or whatever. And then, because it was such great weather, he'd fucking, after he went home with some girl or whatever, he'd go back to the beach about 6 o'clock in the morning and sleep in a fucking deck chair and then get up and go take a shower at the fucking gym, work out at the gym, sit on the beach, then go to the fucking show the next day, take a shower after the match there, come back, go back to the fucking club. He didn't have a fucking home.
Talk about Rick Mcgraw a little bit. What kind of guy was he? You were around him in Memphis in 82, and then, of course, he would die in 85. Tell us about being around him, and where were you when you heard that he passed away?
Well, he reminds me in retrospect, I didn't know that I would ever meet somebody else like that, but physically he reminded me of Candido.
Yeah.
Because he was short and squat, but he was in good shape. He was really powerful, strong as a fucking bull, and could take those nice bumps and the big backdrops and everything, even though even though he wasn't tall, which doomed him in some places. He was, visually you could buy him as being a strong little fuck, and he could do some shit. And he was fun. I mean, I knew him the first couple months that I got in the business because he and the Dream Machine were the New York Dolls setting up the Fabulous Ones entrance. And I got to work with him some, but He was a good guy. Had one of those little fucking diesel cars that he claimed would save him money on gas. This was in 82 or whatever, but it just sounded like a goddamn lawnmower. But, you know, he was a fun guy, liked to laugh and joke around, was a good worker. And then that was he was probably the wrestling death that shocked me more than anybody else's, because they didn't happen then. He was one of the first ones. And in hindsight, obviously, I guess we should have known he's on fucking steroids heavy, because he was so big and so fucking powerful. But he had gone, where the fuck did he go after Memphis? God damn it. Wherever the fuck he had ended up in the WWF, quick draw Rick Mcgraw for about a year. And then in 85, he has a heart attack and he's 30 years old and dies. And I was like, what the fuck? Because we didn't know about heart attacks and steroids. We didn't hardly know about steroids. And nobody that wasn't happening to anybody yet. So he was one of the first ones. And normally if a wrestler in those days died young, it'd be a heart attack, or it'd be a car accident rather than a heart attack. So that was like, oh, fuck. And then, of course, that scared me, because I'm always thinking, oh, shit, a heart attack. You know, that's what I'm going to have one of these days. But he was only 30. And he was like fucking, just 5 years older than me.
You, in 1984 in Mid-South, for a brief period of time, were around Jay Youngblood. I mean, he died in 1985, too, just a year later. What about Jay Youngblood? Did you get to be around him, too? I mean, I know he was in a babyface locker room. So did you actually get to interact with him at all?
Yeah, no, the locker rooms were together in Shreveport at TV, at the Irish McNeil. So, and we have a couple other buildings as well. But yeah, he was a nice guy, and I had admired his team with Steamboat. I wish we could have stolen more of their shit, but they were baby faces. But they were fucking great baby faces. When he came in, actually, I wasn't as shocked about that as I was about Mcgraw, because I didn't, but point is, we had already heard that Youngblood had somewhat of an issue with substance abuse. And he wasn't in Mid-South very long there, but he was working fine. And, because Steamboat has made it plain that he loved teaming with Jay, but they were completely different in that respect. And that's why one of the reasons why that team had to split up in the Carolinas is they were just too different in that respect, even though they loved each other as partners. So there was already some scuttlebutt that Jay had an issue with things, so it wasn't as big of a shock. But come to find out, it really came both from, the same type of shit. We just didn't know about Rick Mcgraw, and there was more steroids involved there, but there was some other stuff going on too. He was a great guy, Youngblood. And I got to work with Mark and Chris Moore actually later on, his brothers. And of course, does everybody know that the Youngbloods were really the Romeros, and their father, Ricky Romero, was the hottest babyface in West Texas forever, not named Funk. So they were second generation guys, had a lot of respect for the business, and they all could work.
The death of Jay, I think, really affected Ricky for the rest of his life. I met him in 97 at Terry Funk's ranch. And the first thing he wanted to talk about was Jay Youngblood. The first thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that really impacted him, losing Jay. And one of the dream matches we never got, Midnight Express versus Steamboat and Youngblood. That would have been something.
Boy, that would have been fun.
Well, let's get another question here, Jim. This one was sent in.
Okay, Brian.
Via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Lucas. Jim, do you have any memory of the Raw Bowl from 1996? Who came up with it? Why did Vince and Jerry Lawler both refer to the NCAA as the NAACP? This was a garbage episode of Raw.
Yes, it was. By the way, they're in good company, because the mayor of Louisville one time years ago, when opening the convention of the NAACP, welcomed the NCAA to Louisville. Because it's another thing. It's the same as the fucking everything that you saw in TNA and everywhere else. People who run wrestling companies are bigger fans of football or some other sport than they are of wrestling. That's why you saw Pac-Man Jones and fucking TNA, even though nobody gave a fucking shit, because people in charge did, because they all liked football. Same thing with Kevin Dunn. He likes football and baseball. You call wrestling a sport, and he will actually go out of his way to come up to you and try to correct you. But yet they foist off basketball and football themed gimmicks in wrestling. This was one of them. I don't remember every detail of it, but I remember that it was stupid and it sucked, and it was a big deal about football because of the fucking Super Bowl, the Raw Bowl, and it was a garbage television program, was it not? Pretty much. It obviously wasn't my idea. It was. I'm sure it was either Vince's idea and had Bruce and Pat flesh it out, or it was Bruce's idea because he knew Vince would like it, and then they fleshed it out, or whatever. But yeah, Vince was wholeheartedly in love with it because it combined football and Gaga in some fashion.
Did Vince ever talk football? Did Vince like football much before the XFL?
Yeah, but he didn't talk a lot of football because here's another one of those things. He likes football. He likes to, the NFL and the guys running into each other. It's a manly sport and all that stuff. But at the same time, I don't know that he ever watched a lot. If he did watch, it was probably the game of the week or whatever, because he never does anything but work. He doesn't go to the grocery. He doesn't go to movies. He goes to work and comes home and works some more. So I don't know if he ever decided. I don't watch football, so I was never invited to sit down and watch any football with him, and I would have declined had that happened because I don't watch football. But he likes the idea, the concept of football. It's a manly sport.
Vince and his concepts. Let's get another question here, Jim. This was sent into CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Anthony. Who would win? Anthony, who would win?
Anthony, is this the same Anthony that works in a grocery store saving his pennies for someday? Is he the one where Mama Leone left a note on the door and said, "Sonny, be home by Monday"? Because I want to tell you, Anthony, that working too hard can give you a heart attack, and you ought to know that by now.
All right. Name Billy Joel's drummer.
Furman Guidasolo.
Liberty DeVito.
Oh, I was close.
There was an episode years ago, some MTV show, where his son was in high school and totally embarrassed by his dad, who had been the drummer for Billy Joel 25 years earlier. And his dad would show up to school and try to be cool with the other kids. It was really, really fun. Anyway, here's Anthony's question. Who would win in a shoot fight today? Billy Jack Haynes or Steve Austin? I ask because a couple of years ago, Billy challenged Austin to a fight after finding out Austin beat his first wife, who before that was Billy's wife. Haynes seems confident he'd win because of his boxing skills. What do you think, Jim?
Oh, good. I hate to even say it because I've seen some of those promos that Billy Jack has done that have been on the internet. And is this an example of someone taking advantage of him, that something's happened, whether it's dementia or CTE or something's going on there and someone's taking advantage of him, or is he pushing this himself or whatever? Because no, I mean, in his day, Billy Jack would have probably dropped most people in the locker room with a shot or two and not thought much about it. But he looks so much different now than he did 30 years ago, both physically and also mentally. While Steve is, besides having a bad neck that prevents him from wrestling, in still pretty much the same cosmetic looking shape, and also is sane and coherent. So I would hope that would never take place, but I couldn't. Billy Jack just looks so bad physically, and you can when I used to speak to him, I mean, once again, we weren't bosom buddies, but I was around him in the locker room for a period of a year or so on and off in Crockett and Dallas, and he was coherent.
Memphis,
and
95.
And in Memphis, yeah, he was coherent and didn't seem to be insane. So I don't know what's going on.
All right, well, our next question, and this may be our final question this week, Jim.
Already?
On this reasonable and pleasant day. This was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from David in Minnesota. It seems that every time there is a brawl backstage on a WWE show, Adam Pearce is helping breaking it up. What was Adam like to work with? Why did he never really get to work for the WWE as talent? Any fun stories about him?
Adam was great to work with, first of all, in Ring of Honor. I think the reason probably why timing for one thing, but why he didn't get a chance to do more in the ring is because they still, especially at that time that he was active as a wrestler, had the whole fucking body and look thing going on. And Adam, I'd probably be the first one to tell you, he's never been Mr. Universe in a fucking bodybuilding contest. But his work was fantastic. As I remember, Kerry sold him to me, Kerry Silken, when I hadn't seen him before. And I was coming to work with him, and he said, "Oh, you're going to love Adam's work because he's old school and he knows how to fucking work, and he's got a different approach than most of the guys on the roster." And he did. And I worked with him some, managing him, and then when he was booking Ring of Honor, I got a chance to work with him. It was easy. We did a lot of shit on the phone, but never any arguments. He had a good mind for the business, and I knew he would probably go on to something better in terms of outside the ring, but a consistent position in wrestling outside the ring. Obviously, everybody knows the story. I wanted him to be the color commentator for Ring of Honor television, but the merchandise weasel filing a human resources complaint because Adam had told him that he was going to knock him the fuck out the next time he saw him, put a kibosh on that because Sinclair Broadcasting, as I believe I'd mentioned, considered the feelings of a low-class turd that sold T-shirts over the quality and fucking viewership of the nationally syndicated television program. However, I digress. The only reason Adam got relieved of his position as Ring of Honor booker was because he had a streak I liked. He was honest. He sent an email to Kerry. The opening line was, "First of all, fuck Sid and Ross." Which Ross was the aforenamed mentioned merchandise weasel, and Sid was the guy running the office from the business side.
Team of
and
idiots.
They had a lot of heat. They had a ton of heat.
Yeah.
But anyway, Adam then forwards me the email. He says, "Well, I just got relieved as booker." I said, "You think?" First of all, fuck Sid and Ross. But even that was nicer than what I later said about and to Ross after he fucking kiboshed Adam as fucking commentator. I still have a hole in the garage wall that I've not fixed, that I punched with my fist when I found out that Adam Pearce was not going to be our color guy because of the merchandise weasel. Anyway, but no, I'm glad that he got with NXT and the producing work and et cetera. And now I guess he's now with the main roster, correct? Or
yeah, I mean,
yes.
Like this letter or like this question said, every time I've watched Raw and seen something happen where they have to send guys out to break it up, it's always him. Always him.
Well, when you think about it, I mean, who else they can't send any of the writers because they're all fucking $150 and 5'0". And so Adam Pearce is a grown man. He's probably one of the only grown men ex-wrestlers that they have on the creative team anymore, or the producing team anymore, that can actually go out there and believably pull people apart.
You know, if I could say something, and I'm not going to say too much here because it will lead me to saying some really awful things about people that you may like. But my first meeting with Ring of Honor, when you had me come to one of their shows in whatever it was, 2009, 2010,
yes,
I forget.
Yes. Adam
Pearce was still the booker. So that first meeting, he was there. And one of the big takeaways I always remember is that he was the one most intently paying attention and listening.
Yeah.
And I always took something away from that he was the booker. He didn't own a piece of it, but it seemed like he was so interested and so determined to find a way to make things work. And I never got to speak to him or anything, but I remember him sitting there, and I remember him paying the closest attention. It's the one big takeaway I had. Well, I have a few other takeaways that I'll say for another time, but it's one of the takeaways from that meeting.
Well, yeah, and because he wanted the company to succeed and wanted it to do better. And I'll give away at least one of your takeaways. Yeah, Sid was sitting there trying to figure out how not to do it because the two things his life revolved around was, one, making sure that he kept the job and saved as much of Kerry Silken's money as possible, and two, that he shit all over anything that would indicate that he was not the one that was saving or making Kerry Silken as much money as possible.
He was the Dick Cheney of Ring of Honor.
Yeah, there you go.
During
Dick
those
Cheney.
years, yeah.
And then the merchandise weasel was sitting there with a blank look, and because his mouth didn't close all the way because he had to breathe through it, and he didn't understand what anybody was talking about anyway.
Yeah. I mean, those are a couple more of my takeaways.
Those were a couple of the takeaways, yes. But we'll leave it there. But anyway, but yes, I enjoyed working with Adam. I always have.
Well, with that, the drive-thru is closed. We don't have our updated closing music yet, so here we go. All right.
Now, we did you get with Knothead about an instrumental?
Knothead is going to try to get an instrumental. Of course, Knothead is I don't know if he's technically a hip-hop guy or just a musician, but he put out a song a few years ago, Everybody Hates Me Because I'm Jim Cornette. The instrumental would work.
No, everybody hates me like I'm Jim Cornette.
Excuse me. I haven't read that issue of
Like
Billboard
I'm Jim Cornette, like I'm Jim Cornette. Society enrages me like Jim Cornette, like Jim Cornette. But if we use the instrumental, it kind of defeats the fucking point of the whole thing.
Well, I don't know about that. It's more about we don't need lyrics as much as we need music to go in and out of. And I will say this though, and maybe we should turn this into something. We'll talk about this on air. This is usually one of our off-air talks, but other people are starting to send in submissions for possible music. So maybe this could be something to have fun with. I'm trying to find one right here because a few came in the last couple of days where people said, hey, I have an idea for theme music. And
well, we ought to play some of these sometime and let people vote upon them.
See, that's what I think could be a good thing, is the idea of let's get as many submissions as possible, although Knothead certainly has a little bit of an advantage because we know that music and, it may work and you like the lyrics, although I think we should just use the instrumental version.
But we need content regardless. We'll do a bit about it. And then somebody send me a funky tune and then maybe I'll put some lyrics, lay down a track, a radio, video, boogie with a suitcase. Living in a disco.
What?
Forget about the rat race. What? Everybody's talking about pop music. Doobie doobie doo wop.
I hate that song so much.
I want to dedicate it. Pop pop doo wop. Educated.
Doobie doobie doo wop. Such a garbage song.
We'll close the goddamn program then. You won't have to listen to it anymore. Pop, pop, pop music. Pop, pop, pop music. New York, London, Paris, Munich. Everybody's talking about pop. I'm going to do this till you close it up.
I'm waiting for you to stop singing.
Pop. I'm just doing it in the background. Pop, pop, pop.
Well, this episode of The Drive-Thru has certainly come to a close this week. What a disaster this is. We want to encourage you to try us again next week. It'll be better. On Monday, and of course, the Jim Cornette Experience when it debuts this Thursday, the big NXT UK review, Tyler Bate versus Walter. I don't know if I've ever heard so many listeners, or not heard, but seen the reaction from so many listeners requesting you to watch a specific match. A lot of people seem to think you're really going to love this match, Jim. And also we should mention that the drive-thru may be, or not the drive-thru, the experience may be up a little bit late this week because we are recording a little bit later to allow me time to watch that show because I got another one of these pesky television crews coming to the castle this week. And we're still shipping orders, so time's a little short. So if it's not up Thursday morning, it will follow shortly thereafter. Possibly afternoon. That's right. And of course, you can access the drive-thru any experience wherever you find your favorite podcast or on YouTube, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, tinyurl.com/official corny YouTube. You go up there, you get full episodes, you get clips, you get the omnibus collections, as well as the amazing exclusive Travis Heckel artwork that everyone has been raving about, starting with me and Jim. So check it out today. And of course, you can access the archive of Jim Cornette clips at the Arcadian Vanguard YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. These are your only two options. So enjoy today and subscribe right now. You can follow Jim on Twitter at the Jim Cornette. You can follow me on Twitter at Great Brian Last. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast. Of course, the time is almost here. Send your money today. Cornette's Collectibles at jimcornette.com. What's on sale right now, Jim?
Oh, fuck it. Give me another week. Keep your money. I actually have a big item coming up in October. I've got to get caught up so that we can put the new item out because I'm not gonna just do that. So I'm trying.
That could be a new slogan. Cornette's Collectibles. Oh, fuck it.
Yeah, oh, fuck it. Just keep your money right now. We're not ready.
But until Thursday on The Experience, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. A reasonable and pleasant tally-ho.
Pop, pop, pop music.